Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on your place in the world. Thank you for joining us for another Atlas Leadership Series webinar with OnBoard. Very happy to have you here. Looks like we got a number of folks filtering into the waiting room already. So thank you for joining us a little bit early. We will get started on the half hour here in just a moment. Very excited for today's topic and speaker. Talking about the 5 habits of high impact board members. That's applicable to any industry. But yeah, just as we enter the third quarter here, keep in mind. All right, looks like we are right on the money as far as time. My name is Josh Palmer. I'm the head of content for OnBoard. If you've joined us before, you might recognize my name and face, but very happy to have you here. Of course, this is an Atlas Leadership Series session provided by, created by, sponsored by OnBoard. If you're unfamiliar with OnBoard, just a quick note on who we are as a company. We're a software maker. We design and develop experiences that help make board meetings simple, secure, and effective. So if you're in the market for a board portal, check us out. We serve more than 6,000 board-led organizations across North America, across the world. Host more than 150,000 meetings on our platform every year, 175,000 users, and we are a worldwide organization. I've got a webinar later this week in England. I do webinars in Australia as well. So if you're in from one of those countries, welcome, and we're happy to have you here. This is just a really quick, mission vision statement from our co-founder, Parun Chadha. He led the organization successfully for the last 20 years before graduating to the executive chair of our board, but he co-founded the company. And this was just kind of his mission statement starting out. There's 3 types of board meetings. So there's the one you prepared for, the board meeting you had, and then the board meeting you wish we had. And of course, it's always our endeavor and our goal to make sure you have that 3rd type of board meeting. Some quick housekeeping notes before I hand it over to our speaker, Michael Corley, today. This is a Zoom webinar. You're muted by default. Your videos are off by default. That's just for us to be able to manage the number of participants we have today. However, we really do encourage your comments, your feedback, your questions. You can send those in via the chat. I'll be present in both the chat and the Q&A feature. So if you do have specific questions, if you've got a feedback on a note on the presentation today, I'll be happy to field those questions. And then we do have some time reserved at the end to answer those questions live. So we'll go through the presentation and hold the questions to the end. We do have one small ask. It's a very, very quick survey, 5-10 seconds at the very most. It just helps us understand, A, if you're interested in our service, and then B, how did we do as a presenter of content today? So we just use that feedback to continuously improve. Bonus, this is something we're trying for the first time. If you do participate in the poll, the feedback poll, we are going to be randomly selecting one winner to receive a $200 Southwest Airlines gift card, excuse me. So yeah, happy flights, happy traveling to one person on the joining us on the guests today. And then this is a frequently asked question with all of our webinars. Yes, we will make the PowerPoint slides available on demand, and you also receive a link to the recording. So if there's anything you missed or you want to share it with a colleague, you can do so. We typically send those out about 12 to 24 hours after the presentation itself. Today's speaker, I'm really excited for, got connected with Michael earlier this summer as part of his hosting duties for the I-501-CU podcast. He's also the CEO and founder of the Corley company. Michael is a nonprofit leadership consultant and host of the I-501-CU podcast. That's for nonprofit board members. He's also advised boards and CEOs since 2009, and he's held executive roles in healthcare and professional services. He served in multiple nonprofit board leadership positions, and is graduate of Leadership Florida. He currently resides in Sarasota, Florida with his wife and his children. Michael, welcome to the presentation. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Josh, I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it. Let me go ahead and tee up the slides I'll use. And hopefully you should be seeing that now, I would imagine. Are we good? All right. Well, welcome, everybody. I appreciate it. As we might have it here in Sarasota, Florida, it's a Sunday afternoon, and I'm looking outside, and we got thunderstorms coming. So if perchance we get disconnected because electricity goes out, I do have a backup plan. I'll be right back on. So let me go ahead and share what we're going to talk about today. 5 habits of high-performing board members. A passion of mine because I've worked with a number of boards. But what we're talking about here is what makes a highly performing board member. And I'm also going to give you a few non-textbook tips. That's stuff that you won't read in the books, but it's reality. And sometimes that's a little more important. All right, just my contact information. Josh just went over all of that. So you have that, and also because this is going to be sent out. And we have a few objectives today. Those 5 key habits. Also, those practical steps to contribute more strategically and confidently. There are a lot of people when they join a board, they're not exactly how confident when they should and should not interact, and how you can extend your influence beyond the boardroom. That's one of the benefits of a board member can have is extend those benefits beyond the boardroom. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. As Josh said, slides will be sent to you. And the free resource he mentioned that you see on the screen is the I-501CU, the podcast for nonprofit board members. And I do want to point out one in particular, the CEO of OnBoard, Mark Huffman, was on about a month ago. And if you go to that, you can listen to him and you can listen on all your favorite podcast sites. So let's get started. So serving on a board of directors, it's an honor. It's an honor to serve on a board of directors. It's a privilege, and it's really important work. Sometimes we get lost in that once we're on the board. We forget that it's honorable, it's a privilege, and it's really important work. And if you think about it, only a small percentage of people in this country, worldwide too, but in this country, will serve on a board of directors, whether it's a nonprofit, a private company, or a for-profit board. So as we think about that, as we go serve on boards, if we go in with that mindset, it will elevate our game and our presence, and it'll give us an opportunity to be even more impactful. Now, as you know, I share this with you because there are multiple different types of boards. The folks of you who are listening, I know many of you serve on nonprofit boards, but there are also some corporate board members here. So as you see in the left-hand column, the primary purpose for a nonprofit board is to advance the mission. But I want to point out it's also to serve the public interest, that tax benefit. And the government looks to us as nonprofit board members to serve in the public interest because we are getting that tax break, the nonprofit tax break. Now, if you look over at a corporate, a private board member, right, it's all about growing the company and profitability. And then publicly traded company, of course, is similar. And you can see it's protect and grow shareholder value. You'll see the stakeholders served. That it should be pretty obvious to you. But I want to point out the fiduciary duties. And if you go from left to right, right from left, they are essentially the same. And we're going to talk a little bit about these. So regardless on what type of board you serve, duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience. And you can see to what those duties hold. But when you think about what is a board of directors, let's take a step back. It's a group of individuals elected to govern, usually at different times, so not everybody comes in at the same time, responsible for setting the mission, strategy, and ensuring legal and ethical compliance. All right. And fiduciaries of the organization, particularly of nonprofit organizations that I just said, to ensure responsible management. But what else? What else? Board members, they're untrained. Very few people have any type of board training. You learn it on the job, unless you're maybe attending sessions like this. They are engaged because of their unique skills. 15 board members, you may have 15 different skills, which is beneficial, but also you inherently are creating some silos in thought. Oftentimes, there's no relationship with their colleagues. You come onto a board, it could be, especially a nonprofit or really any board, it could be any time in the whole cycle. So you may not even have a relationship with any of your colleagues. So you're coming in as a virtual unknown, and you don't know anybody else around the table. That's challenging. And it is challenging to help you contribute. And let's face it, most board members don't have a deep understanding of the work being done. You're not in it day to day. So how can you have a deep understanding if you're not in it every day? And most interesting, board members are those bosses who show up to work only a few hours a month. That's it. And yet they're expected to do all the things we just said, but they're not there to understand the depth of the organization. So it's a real conundrum. And really, basically, it's a recipe for dysfunction if we're not careful. But it can work if you're committed to being a high-performing board member. So let's talk a little bit about that. So what is a high-performing board member? And you may think about this, somebody who actively contributes. Remember, we talked about that a minute ago, depending on when you come in to the board, but you're expected to contribute, think strategically, understand governance, and be effective in your communication and your engagement. Someone who understands the roles of a board member and those responsibilities. Oh, and you got to be able to work with the other board members. Remember those people I just said you probably don't know very well? Well, you are expected to work collaboratively with them, especially in nonprofit boards, because you're all volunteers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And this may be one of the most important roles for a board member, especially an effective one, is to support the CEO as he or she drives the organization forward. Yes, you are their boss by governing law, but the fact is you want to support that individual because they are there on a daily basis while you are not. Also, a highly effective board member respects the duties. Now, you may have heard of these when we talked about these a few minutes ago. You may understand these from law: duty of care, duty of loyalty, and duty of obedience. And so what are they? Duty of care. A highly effective board member understands they must prepare, participate, and protect the organization. You have the obligation of a duty of care. Duty of loyalty. You act in the organization's best interest. That means you don't act in your own self-interest. You act in what's best interest of the organization. That's why, certainly in nonprofit boards, we have those conflict of interest policies and forms that we ask everybody to sign to remove any conflict of interest, or at least make it aware. Doesn't mean you can't have a conflict, just means you have to disclose it. And then any voting, you're excluded from the room. Duty of obedience. Uphold the mission, the bylaws, and the law. That is board members, the duties. And these are really important because they define, legally, if you will, the responsibilities of a board member. An effective, and I'd argue a highly effective board member, but in a lot of states, and particularly my state here in Florida, if you exercise duty of care, duty of loyalty, duty of obedience, there's an indemnification provision in state statute protecting you as a board member. That should be incentive. That alone should be incentive to exercise these duties. So what are 5 habits? 5 habits. This was the title of the presentation today. I'm going to talk a little bit about these. We show up prepared. Stay mission focused. That's very important. Ask strategic questions. Engage between meetings. And governance as a practice. So show up prepared. This is straight from duty of care. How do you do that? Now, these are going to seem very obvious. When you look at them, you think, oh my gosh, well, that's very obvious. But we'd be surprised, maybe disappointed at how many board members don't attend either the regular board meeting and or the committee meetings. It becomes highly disruptive for the reasons you can imagine right now. It doesn't allow you to gain traction, have that firm understanding of the organization, which is already challenged, as I mentioned before. Prepare for meetings beforehand, that second bullet point. Important because we've all been there when somebody has not read the materials and now starts asking questions, and it slows the meeting down, and we now have to answer all those questions that had he or she prepared properly, we wouldn't be having this granular discussion. We could focus on strategic things. A passion of mine is reading the financial information. Oftentimes, as I'm working with boards, I hear the excuse, well, I don't understand financials. Financials aren't my thing. To which I say, but it doesn't have to be your thing, but you've got a legal obligation to at least have a general understanding. And you certainly have the obligation to help position and ask the right questions to understand those financials. because it's under that heading of expect what you inspect. And how many times have we heard of, particularly in the nonprofit world, for-profit world, as a matter of fact, of something that's happened at the nonprofit from a fraudulent perspective? It's because those questions were not being asked at the board level. Don't be afraid to ask for information as you get the board packet beforehand to help you prepare to ask those strategic questions, to avoid asking those operational or granular questions beforehand, to review that information and reach out to the board chair or the CEO. A very highly effective board member does these things. He or she shows up prepared. And I'll give you a little secret, a little hint, especially people who use software like OnBoard. And I've talked to a number of CEOs who do this. They know exactly who's logged in and who is not logged in on the board and who's checking and reviewing and prepping the materials beforehand. So I would encourage you to log in and review the materials beforehand if you have an online system. Stay mission focused. An effective board member stays mission focused by regularly reviewing the mission. They say, oh, I know what this organization does, but it's maybe been a month since you've really discussed it at length. So to understand and review the mission before going into that board meeting and letting that mission guide your decisions. If a board meeting's done effectively, then you're going to have strategic questions and you're going to have generative discussions and you're going to be making some decisions. And you always want to tether that back. You want to tether that back to the mission to avoid your own personal bias. And it also keeps you from getting micromanaged or you micromanaging the CEO and staff. And maybe most importantly, it helps you avoid, you see on your screen, the mission creep. The mission creep that inevitably happens when we're talking about, especially in the nonprofit space, doing good. And wow, can't we help these people by providing this service? Which service may not be within your scope, within your mission. And that scope creep is a real thing. And you'll have out of your average, 12 to 15 board members, you will have one or two that think, oh, I just came across somebody that needs this help. Let's go ahead this way. Let's get this grant. There's money available. And it's important that the board, an effective board member will go, wait a second, let's talk about our mission. Is this consistent with our mission? Because if it's not, it's going to cause you to deviate. Ask strategic questions. This is under the duty of care that I talked about a minute ago. Board set the strategic level, the directional, the mission level, staff operational. Now, obviously, and we're going to talk in a minute about that, there is some gray area. But questions to ask at the board level you see on your screen, particularly in today's environment, what political trends or economic trends are going to impact our work over the next 1, 3, 5 years? That's discussions that should be being had. How do we approach that? Do we have a sustainable funding model? Are we listening to our stakeholders? And that's across all 3 different types of boards. Are we listening? Those are great questions to ask and keep the discussion at a very strategic level. An effective board member will rarely get into operational issues. And you say, well, wait a second, I've got the right to know. I'm bored. You just told me I've got these legal responsibilities and these obligations. Yeah, you do. But you have to remember, you don't have the knowledge. As a rule of thumb, you don't have the knowledge of the operations of the organization, really get into it. The CEO, executive director may ask you, and that's fine to have that discussion. And you want to prompt certain questions maybe related to it. But remember, when it gets into the nitty gritty, that is not the job of the board member. And just remember, you probably don't have the knowledge and understanding because you're not there day to day. Highly effective board members in between meetings, they're going to engage with their fellow board members and with the organization as a whole. Over my years, I've worked with any number of board members, and it's pretty obvious who is involved between meetings and who goes. You can see on your screen that attends events and is visible in the community, reaches out to fellow board members. That is certainly something I encourage all board members to do. Why not take advantage of the relationship you have and meet the folks that are around the table? Typically, they're community leaders and great resources to have and great friends and colleagues to have. So you build those relationships and respond to emails that from the ED and from fellow board members, effective board members just do that. And I'll tell you another little secret, that fourth bullet point, how you get that monthly or weekly update from your CEO, your executive director? Just respond with a quick email. Thank you. I can't tell you how many CEOs I work with will have shared with me and said, I send that out every month, that update, and I never hear from anybody. And I know they get it, but I never hear from anybody. So I have no idea if they read it. Except for that one. There's always that one board member will say, thank you, appreciate it, and maybe even have a question. And it's just fascinating to me that here are these CEOs, these executive directors running important organizations, and they're not getting the response. And it's a little like a letdown in terms of they just want people to know that they're reading the material they're sending out. So if you want to be the CEO's favorite, there you go. And effective board members, highly effective ones, also remember governance as a practice. It's an ongoing self-reflection. It's an ongoing understanding. It's an ongoing meeting the board members. It's recruiting board members. It's talking to your friends and your colleagues and bringing people in to the organization. And you see this quite a bit. And they support and they evaluate the CEO. So you say, wait a second, Corley, support and evaluate. Effective board members, as I've mentioned before, will support the CEO, but also coach and evaluate him or her, which should be a formal process of what the board does on the board calendar, but providing that feedback so the executive director understands where he or she can improve, what the board thinks of him or her. And it's not necessarily, doesn't have to be a once a year thing, but that coaching, that very effective CEOs, they crave that feedback. And then a board member will pick up on that, will offer that. And of course, governance to protect the assets and provide the financial oversight, which I talked about a little bit a minute ago. That financial oversight is really important to understand, ask those questions, and make sure somebody knows that things are being looked at. The more you do it, the easier it gets. All right, so when I shared the 5 high impact areas, right? We just talked about these: show up prepared, focused, strategic questions, engage between meetings, and governance as a practice. Simple, but not always easy. And I'm sure somebody out there is saying, hey, Corley, that's great, but what makes for an ineffective board member? Because some of us learn by seeing the habits we don't want to emulate. So I thought I'd share with you what makes a less impactful board member. I chose those words because it sounded nicer than what I was thinking. That one that does not show up, doesn't come on a regular basis. That makes for an ineffective board member. Don't join the board. Sometimes you join a board and things change in your lives and you're not able to have that discussion, step down, exit gracefully, come back on at a later time. Those that fail to prepare, I talked about that a minute ago. If you fail to prepare for the meeting, then be quiet at the meeting. Don't regurgitate historical, don't regurgitate decisions that have been previously made. Prepare. Those that dominate or disrupt the board meetings. And I'm gonna pick on some people out there because I've seen this too many times, and being a former for-profit business leader myself, we're the worst. We are the absolute worst. Entrepreneurs are the worst of the worst. And I say that with all love. It's because they're accustomed to commanding the floor and having an audience and probably being one of the smartest people in the room. But I will tell you something we have to remember as board members is we're all volunteers. Unless you're on a corporate and a private board, different. I'm talking about nonprofit board. We're all volunteers. Everybody wants to contribute to the organization. And so we don't want to dominate a discussion. We, of course, certainly don't want to be disruptive. We want to give everybody the opportunity to contribute because that'll make for a much more effective meeting and much more effective governance. And that's kind of somebody that rubber stamps everything, just says yes, whatever, probably because they haven't prepared, doesn't contribute, doesn't offer input, doesn't use their experience to help the board be better. Those that micromanage staff. Those, and I know there are executive directors watching right now because I saw a couple in the chat. And I'll speak on your behalf. Board members, you're allowed to talk to staff, but you should not dictate. You got to be careful asking them to ponder things, because staff will immediately think it's an edict from a board member and run out and do it. So what I encourage everybody to do is, while you can have a relationship with staff, you've got to be careful. Any type of working situation should go through the CEO, the executive director, because what inevitably happens is you may make a statement in passing about, oh, we ought to do something with our programming. Staff takes that and runs with it, and before you know it, you got a number of people working on something that should not have been worked on. Here's another, somebody who ignores their fiduciary duty. As we said before, you do have fiduciary duty and responsibilities, and you have to understand that you do it in the nonprofit world. You should read the 990 right before it goes out. You should approve it as a board. So while you may have a finance committee or an audit committee that will review it, sign off on it, let the experts do that, but you as a board member certainly have the obligation, because you're signing off on it, that you should review those things. I touched on this a minute ago. Those board members that disengage from the mission, that they will want to do one of two things: expand the mission, look at doing something else, or no longer subscribe to the mission. That doesn't happen too often. But if you find yourself in that position, you don't have the passion for the mission anymore, you really should step off. You'll see a lot of this, those that resist change, those that we've always done it this way. We've always had that event. We have had this gala for umpteen million years. Give it, you're not making any money. But we've always done it. People expect it. And so those board members that can't grapple with the fact that things are changing and we need new ways of doing things. Oh, we need to use that online board portal. That may be one of the biggest ones right now. What's wrong with email? We've done email for years. So we want board members that are willing to go with the flow and willing to explore change, not be automatically resistant to it. And a really bad board, or less impactful board member, is somebody who might damage the organization's reputation. When we're in board meetings, it's the understanding that the conversation is confidential. It doesn't leave the boardroom. What happens if somebody walks out and starts talking about, oh, can you believe the CEO did this? I'm frustrated because they chose to go this way versus the way I wanted to. That really does damage the organization's reputation, or put question marks in people's minds about the organization. And that makes for a highly ineffective board member. That could really do a lot of damage. The concept is, in the board, it stays in the boardroom. You have your arguments, you discuss in the boardroom. Once you leave that boardroom, the discussion is positive and supportive of the organization, because that's what the board members have to do, should do. And I would just ask you, as you look at this, don't be this board member. Don't be this board member that exhibits these 9 characteristics of less impactful board members. But you may say, Corley, I want to be a superstar nonprofit board member. What can I do? I want to be that highly effective one. You talked about the 5 habits, but give me a little more. All right. Read the articles of incorporation and bylaws regularly. Yes, boring, but very important, because if you understand the organizational structure of the organization, you then can offer input and make changes, just offer changes if necessary. The articles of the I heard an attorney say this one time, the articles of the incorporation are like the Declaration of Independence, and the bylaws are like the Constitution. So I would suggest you read them at least once a year. It's nothing exciting, but it does give you insight into the organization, the governing structure of the organization. Lead a committee or be an officer. You typically have standing committees, got any number of committees. Do that. Be an officer for the organization, the chair, vice chair, whatever titles that you have. And I will give you a little tip, especially for those of you in the business world. By doing this, this is the best leadership development there is out there. And I would argue bar none, for any number of reasons, because you're doing real-time leadership in a very unfamiliar environment, able to watch others. But by being a leader in that organization, you can certainly grow your leadership skills. If you want to be a superstar, tell your friends and your colleagues, be that ambassador, wear that ambassador sash as you're out there, wear your name tag as you're out there. Let everybody know that you're associated with this organization. Most people join boards because of the board members, in addition to the mission and the CEO. But those board members, people do look at that. And we all, if we have a friend, like somebody we respect talking about it, we're going to pay attention to that organization. Just talked about this. You want to be a superstar board member? Make a personal, meaningful donation. Personal, your own checkbook. Yes, your company can contribute. Your maybe your foundation, but making a personal contribution says that I support this organization, I believe in it. And oh, by the way, when you're especially in nonprofits, when they're going for grants, funders ask for, do you have 100% board participation, personal board participation in funding? And so it's really important that you don't put your executive director, CEO at risk of having to say, no, not. Introduce donors to the executive director or to the development leader. I guess on the for-profit side, this would be akin to any private equity or folks to them, any funders to it, but introduce donors. That's the connection. That's how nonprofits fund and operate, is through connections and relationships. So I would encourage you to play that role as a board member. Recruit other board members. Oftentimes we sit here and think, oh gosh, it's the responsibility of the CEO, executive director to find board members. Well, not really. The board is in charge of the organization. We touched on governing structure. So the board should certainly get input from the executive director, but the board should find board members. It should be actively recruiting colleagues, friends, whatnot, to join their boards. And I tell you, if you really want to be a superstar board member, be that trusted standing board to your CEO, that executive director. Yes, it's kind of an interesting relationship because you are their boss, but you're one of, at least in the nonprofit sector, probably one of 12 to 15. In the for-profit, private boards are a little bit smaller, 4, 5, 6. And then, of course, publicly traded boards are a little bit bigger than that. But the CEO, executive director, like in any organization, it's a challenging position. And sometimes they just need somebody to bounce ideas off of. And so, particularly in the nonprofit world, you can play that role and you can help support him or her so that they can make decisions, make better decisions and drive the organization. As I said at the beginning, board service is really an honor and a privilege. We don't want to forget that. And I will say as I wrap up and open up for Q&A, now go and have the board meeting you would wish you had had, like Josh said earlier. So I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity. We're going to open up for questions. And just a reminder, because you're going to get sent this, there's the contact information. If you need anything, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And we'll go from there. Josh.
That's great, Michael. Thank you. That was amazing. Yeah, it totally speaks to all my experience so far. Before we get into Q&A, just a quick reminder that we will be doing a quick poll, Morgan, on our webinar operations. Super quick poll, 2 questions. This is your chance to possibly win a $200 gift card for Southwest Airlines, even though you may have to pay baggage fees now. Yeah, so we'll just leave this up. Michael, one of the first questions I thought was really great, and this really speaks to kind of the dichotomy of nonprofit board types. Let's see, I've got to get back up here. Linda says, we are a working board in the sense that we also act as volunteers for events and marketing. Are these fiduciary obligations, the duty of care, loyalty, obedience, are those reasonable expectations for a working board? And are there different sets of expectations for the other kind of board, a fundraising board?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I didn't get time to get into that. And so the working board, typically organizations start off as a working board, right? They're volunteers. And what I think it's really important when you're functioning as the board. So in your board meetings, you have that governance hat on. When you're out and about, you have that volunteer hat on, if you will, and you remove the governance hat. You can't totally do that, right? But to recognize there's different roles in each. And it's important that you recognize those and don't overstep your bounds as a board member when you're volunteering. Enjoy the volunteering. But when you're back in that boardroom, now you're obviously going to bring what you learned to the boardroom. But when you're in that boardroom, yeah, it's duty, care, governance, and obedience.
Yeah, absolutely. Related to this, and this is, I'm personally interested in this. You had asked, you know, what states are we presenting to? But this one is specific to Florida, so I hope you can answer it. Margaret asked if there's an indemnification for those who are exercising their duties correctly. Is it correct that nonprofits do not carry D&O insurance or director and officer insurance?
Yeah, and that's actually a great question. No, absolutely carry it, because anybody can sue anybody. But if you go, Mark, if you go to chapter 617 of the Florida Code, that's where it is, the indemnification provision, and it becomes a defense mechanism in the event that you were to get sued, and you can demonstrate, well, we did exercise all these duties. But no, I always, in fact, I wouldn't join a board if you didn't have E&O and D&O insurance. That's one thing. If anybody's considering joining a board, that's one of the first questions you should ask. Do you have it?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, then you would obviously have to just, part of the D&O insurance, you'd have to disclose any kind of overlapping conflicts of interest. So yeah. Ed asked a great question. I've got a point of view on this. He says, I haven't served on a board in some years, but it used to be that board meetings were face-to-face. Is that not the case now?
Well, it's interesting. So what I've observed is, of course, a few years ago, everything was online and people enjoyed the convenience factor. Then people enjoyed getting back together in person, and tremendous value in doing that. What I've seen now is a little bit of a blend. And what I encourage folks is get into a rhythm. Get into a rhythm, meaning if you want, depending on the number of board meetings you have a year, say this is either virtual, this is either in person, and then depending on the board, I hate to exclude anybody, but if you're having an in-person meeting and you want to watch, okay, but recognize it's going to be really tough for you to participate, and the board chair has to navigate that and not allow it to be disruptive. Perfect world, it's in person. They're so much more effective, and you build those relationships that we talked about. But reality is, you're probably going to have a blend.
Yeah, especially in the pandemic era, we saw a lot of boards go to fully virtual meetings, and there were some benefits there. Your recruiting posture can be much more widespread. You can be much more expert-led versus just geographically focused. If you are a more national organization, there's a certain kind of egalitarianism in those virtual-only meetings, and that everybody has one box and only one person can speak at a time. But like to your point of you're much more effective in person. You can't read body language. You can't tell somebody if they're wrinkling their nose at a certain part of the financial review. You can't see if their arms are crossed or if they're disagreeing with you non-verbally. But yeah, it's always been our position as well that either or, the hybrid meeting where some are joining by phone, some are joining by Zoom, that is a much more difficult needle to thread versus just having one or the other. So
yeah. I totally agree. Yes.
Yeah. Jill asked a great question. Where is a good source of a board job description, just in terms of being able to evaluate the board's effectiveness? Obviously, you'd want to compare the performance against the job description, which they originally came in on. You got some sources for job descriptions, Mike?
Yeah, board source is a logical place to go to if it's a nonprofit board. They're kind of the standard. There's oh gosh, I'm gonna draw a complete blank. There are sources, but board source definitely. I would go to that, and they've got a great tool for a board self-assessment, and they got the ability to track over multiple years of doing it. It's a nice resource.
Yeah, and I found that I'm blanking on the name, but any of the regional kind of aggregators of nonprofits are a great source as well, or even just cribbing from other job descriptions that you like.
Yes.
One thing I found interesting lately is that we did a recent survey of nonprofit boards, and just asking them, are you using ChatGPT or Perplexity or these AI tools to help support your board work? Vast majority, 70–80% said yes. So that's another way you could custom craft a job description using a ChatGPT or a Gemini or something like that. let's see. We got another question from Anoop. Board effectiveness tips were great and pointed out simple, not easy. How board members are interviewed? How do you filter out kind of maybe those potentially ineffective board members in the interview or recruiting process as somebody is coming off their term and you're trying to fill a new seat?
Great question. And I'm a big advocate that before somebody joins the board, have them serve on a committee. If you can implement that structure, that gives you insight into how they operate. It lets them look at you and understand, do they want to be involved in the organization? So properly done, which is fairly easy to do, that's highly effective as people ascend to the board. It may be you're only on there 6 months on a committee. I think beyond that, and even it's a lot of relationship and conversation, and set those expectations at a lunch, at a meeting with the executive director, the board chair, or the governance chair. This is what we expect. This is how we operate. Here are our values. This is, you will be honest about the amount of time when the in-person meetings versus virtual meetings, what the donation expectation is, even if it's just zero, it's a meaningful amount. Just be explicit. What I've found and even experienced it as a board member, sometimes you don't know what you're getting into because it was never shared with you. So share with them and give them the opportunity to opt out themselves, if you will. Then if something happens and they're not effective board members, they're not involved, at least then you can have a conversation with them and say, hey, look, we set the expectations and it's just not working.
Yeah. In our research, I mean, it's probably way more prevalent. So average number of board members per organization, this is across all industries that are board led, not just nonprofits. About 12 to 14 board members per organization is typically fairly average. Well, 1 in 5 of those, 17%, or almost 1 in 5, according to our latest 2024 survey, are considered ineffective by their peers for the exact reasons that you mentioned. They're not communicating in between meetings. They're showing up unprepared for meetings and then asking a lot of questions that were covered in the board book. I was curious if you think, and this is something, another piece that our research has uncovered, is that most board books are only sent maybe a week to 4 days in advance of the actual meeting. And if you're thinking about somebody who has a full-time job, in addition to their board duties, that's a very small window to prepare. How do you help coach people to be better prepared in that small window ahead of the board meeting?
Yeah. Well, best laid plans would be 2 weeks ahead, right? But come on, it puts a burden on the staff. Let me share a few things. It does put a burden. That's their job, staff, to put the board book together. It takes a lot of time. Board members don't know that. It takes quite a bit of time to do an effective board book. I always tell people, give them a weekend before. So whatever day the meeting's on, give people a weekend beforehand to review the board packet. If you send it 2 weeks, they're not going to review it 2 weeks. Most people won't. It's going to be still that weekend before. If you can't give, you've got to do at least the weekend before. If you don't do that, make it up. It's a Wednesday meeting, you send it on Monday. Don't expect people to have read it. I mean, it's not reasonable to have expected that in a nonprofit board situation where you've got volunteers.
Yeah, and if you think about a multi-100-page board book, you're thinking most board members would prefer at least having 8 to 10 full hours of preparation to go through that information. Great question for Anonymous here. Talking about a director of development. Is there an expectation when you're hiring a director of development for your nonprofit fundraising? Are they expected to fund their own position? That's a very specific question.
I know a lot of experts in the fund development field, and they'll say, yes, you should pay for yourself first year, certainly by 18 months. I don't do fund development, so I don't know, but I do, since I've heard that from experts, I do share that if I'm working with the executive director and they're going to hire somebody, so that person should pay it for themselves fairly quickly, 12, 18 months. If not, you probably need to make a decision. And the beautiful thing, my observation and development, because previous life, you can put milestones and metrics, and you're going to know fairly quickly, you should, if they're going to be effective or not.
Yeah. This is a personal question, and I'm sure a lot of the audience members, we always get a lot of questions about how do I get that first board seat? what would you recommend people look at if they're looking to advance their career, get another another name on the resume, or if they're just willing to do some more volunteer work in a cause that they support?
Yeah, find an organization that you're passionate about or a mission that you're passionate about. Offer to volunteer. Give them a call. Let them know you're interested in learning more on a possible board position. I find, especially with younger people, there's a reluctance to let people know because you think, oh my gosh, it's a board position. Oh, I can't do that. I'm only 23 and I'm just out of school and my first job. But if you're passionate about it, go volunteer, meet with them, and let them know you want to be on a board. And I think people would be surprised how many boards would entertain the idea. It doesn't mean you'll get on, at least you'll enter into that vetting process, and they'll put you on the list to learn more about you and give you that opportunity.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, even joining a committee as a non-board member is an opportunity as well.
Absolutely.
And I think you mentioned this as well, is that it's crazy to think that the vast majority of people have never served on a board. But once you get the hang of it, the basics of it, it's governance is governance is governance. In a lot of organizations, you're always going to have a lot of risk. You're always going to have your finance committee, those types of things. So the board kind of template is the same in a lot of different organizations.
Very good point, Josh. Yeah.
A couple more questions coming in. Oh, this is a great question. I was actually going to lead into this. Speaking of a first-time board member, you think about the normal term is probably 1 to 2 years. What's the grace period for a new board member for them to get up to speed and be contributing effectively? What would your expectation if you had a new board member who had never served before? How soon should they be effective in their role, or what does that grace period look like for you?
Well, I said the effectiveness could be pretty much right off the bat, depending on the experience and what the expectations were when they came in. I think obviously there's a lot of listening. You want to get to know the fellow board members, read previous minutes to get an understanding of where the organization is. But I would expect the people to contribute almost immediately. Maybe you're going to be a little bit quieter that first meeting, second meeting, but you're expected to contribute and share your expertise. And hopefully you've got a good chair facilitating the meeting and providing opportunity for you to contribute. But I wouldn't hide for very long, because you're brought on for a reason, probably because of your unique qualities. You've got expertise to share, so do it. And it's a growth opportunity for you as well. So 1-2 meetings. I think when I hop on board, I'm 1-2 meetings, because that's just my personality. Be a little bit quiet, feel things out. And I'm like, all right, we gotta really sink our teeth into it now.
Yeah, and in that sense too, it's a great opportunity for the board to refresh and reset and look at that mission, that vision, and re-engage with the basics of that. And I think, whenever I join a new organization, I call it new guy capital. I'm going to ask you a lot of dumb questions. I've got new guy capital.
And that's true, and that's great. Take advantage of it.
Yeah. Great question from Christy. I don't know if this applies in the nonprofit space. I have an answer on some of the public corporate boards. Board members are paid to attend meetings, and you want to encourage in-person attendance. Do you pay less for virtual attendance?
Oh gosh, I don't have an answer for that, because my experience is nonprofit boards, and 99% of them aren't compensated. So
yeah, it's a volunteer position. I am currently trying to set up an advisory board for our organization, and there is a difference in the per diem rate that we will pay for an in-person meeting attendance versus a virtual meeting attendance, but the expectations of how many meetings you attend versus in-person versus virtual are the same. So at the end of the day, they get paid the same. It's just when they want to get paid that per diem for their actual attendance. So,
that makes sense.
Great. Well, audience members, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the session with Michael. I don't see any other questions in the Q&A or chat, but please do reach out to Michael if you do have more questions. He's put his information out there. He's at the Corley company. You can find him online and LinkedIn. Michael, thank you so much for sharing your point of view and just your experience with our audience. I really appreciate it.
Josh, I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody listening, and good luck on your board service.
Great. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.